Hello and welcome to Team Franco Bodybuilding Podcast. Hoping everyone is doing fantastic out there, getting it done both in and out of the gym. So, we have a good topic for you guys today, and this can certainly be geared towards those who are finishing up their contest prep, just starting one for the next year, or even thinking about competing. Because I'm going to strongly remind you that mindset really does matter. Now, the teaser with the title, Competition Preparation, Embrace the Mindset of Being Relaxed when Locked In. Now, I'm going to first answer the question, what is locked in? Locked in simply means you're in a groove. You're in the zone. You're following the workouts. You're following the diet. You're getting your steps in. You're doing the necessary cardio that was prescribed to you. You have the perfect sleep. You have everything in order. Everything is going really good. And that's where this podcast will come into a play. And I'm going to cover 7 guidelines of things that for you to remain chill about and give you my reasons why. But I'm going to emphasize that sometimes just getting locked in is the hardest part when it comes to a contest prep. And what I mean by that means finally getting your diet in order, or getting a good workout schedule, or getting your sleep in order. That to me is the most challenging part, at least personally for myself. And I was just discussing this with a client where my training's always on point. I think I'm recovering well. My sleep is good. It's just fine-tuning the diet and limiting my night eating. I probably disclosed that to you guys before. But once that gets controlled, I'm locked in. And then I remain chill throughout the whole prep, whether if it's 3, 4, 6 months, whatever the case may be. So it's usually that transition before you get locked in that I think can be the most challenging. Although I have clients that can flip a switch and they can dial it right up. So that's why I really emphasize and I say that once you are locked in, it's a matter of coasting through and making necessary changes, but not being too drastic. Although, to the point of wanting to do this podcast, quite often when people are locked in, they tend to freak out even more. They tend to question themselves even more. And again, you've heard me say this before, I blame it on social media. I blame it on people comparing themselves to others. Instead of staying within yourself, realizing that, if I'm a first-time competitor, I need to literally focus on what my body changes from what I looked like a year or 2 years ago, or how it changes every few weeks by following the plan after being locked in. But that's not the case for many. And a few of these topics I'm going to cover, I've been guilty, and I'll explain to you and I'll cover them as far as like where my panic or where my drastic thoughts came into play. But then you learn that just being locked in is all you need. All you need is to be having that tunnel vision rather than grasping for straws, thinking, oh, I need to do this because she just won the Orton Cup, so I need to follow that. Or I need to change my workouts because bikini division, they focus on the glutes, so I need to train them 3 times a week. No. Once you are locked in, and again, I think that's the hardest part for a lot of us, and it shouldn't just be because we pick a show that locks us in. You want to be in a good spot physically, mentally, and just peacefully being able to handle the prep ahead. So what are these 7 things that I think that all competitors need to be chill about once they're locked in? All right. First and foremost are your workouts. If you have been happy with your training and content with your workouts, and you know that you've been gaining muscle, that's all you got to do, guys. You just got to coast in with your current training schedule. Now's not the time after you're locked in and you're within 3 or 4 months changing it up just because you think you need to. Training legs more just because you think you need to bring up your legs. That time is over. Only because you're in a caloric deficit, and the biggest goal for a natural competitor with their workouts leading into a show after being locked in is to maintain as much muscle as possible. You're not going to be bringing up your delts or your back in a caloric deficit in that short a time. The only favorable time to bring up muscle groups is when you're in a maintenance or surplus of calories and you don't have a competition in sight, so you can prioritize. So don't go chasing workouts thinking that you got to do this because now you're in contest prep being locked in. So trust what you're following, trust what your coach is prescribing if you have a coach, and if it's been good up until the point of getting locked in, then you stay with it. Don't add stress. You don't have to change it up. And very similar to the diet. This one is probably the biggest one out of the 7 that I'm going to cover, where people will have success. They start their caloric deficit, they're dropping body fat at a good rate, but all of a sudden they get in their head and they think, oh shit, I need to be leaner. Well, my defense to that is maybe you should have started off sooner, not necessarily be more drastic. Where you got to trust yourself and not always change the diet every few days or every week. If you make a diet change, you got to give it at least a week to 2 weeks to let it materialize, to really learn how your body responds. And I also got to remind you that if you were within decent shape, and you're locked in with your diet, every passing week when you lose body fat, it's going to be less because you have less reserve to pull from. So your body weight is less, and if you drop 2 pounds in a week, don't expect to be dropping 2 pounds every single week. That's during contest prep. Now, if you're a lifestyle person just starting out, yeah, you can probably carry that if you have an excessive amount of body fat. But this podcast is really geared towards those who are in contest prep, locked in with their diet, and just suggesting for you not to make crazy changes, because what can happen if you keep on pushing the diet? You're going to have metabolic adaptation. And what does that mean? That's basically your metabolism and your hormones giving you the FU, the big finger, saying, I can't do this. I need to slow down because you're not fueling me enough and we're doing too much activity. Then what happens? People then panic if you reach that drastic phase, and they end up doing more, and they do more, and they burn more muscle tissue. And then they look back and like, holy shit, the scale really dropped, but I look worse than I did a month ago. So that's why trusting it, and worst case scenario, if you're really, really not happy, you push the show off. You pick another show. There's no shame in that, as long as you're doing it the right way. Now, the exception to the rule is if someone has a lot of years competing and they have a ton of muscle, they could get a little bit more aggressive because they're going to be losing body fat, but they also understand that they can lose muscle tissue and it's worth it to them. But for the majority of us out there, first-time competitors thinking about competing in a year, give yourself plenty of time and trust yourself without making the drastic changes to the diet. And what I mean by drastic is dropping 500 calories every week or some crazy amount, because you're going to be down to zero, feeling like shit, and then questioning yourself on why did I do this drastic changes. And I'm here to say, if a coach is telling you to do these drastic changes, question them. And also question what's the end game. Because, again, you need to be on the same page, and you want to be fair to one another, but just don't follow blindly. The third one, and this is a little bit simpler one to cover, is cardio. And it falls into line with the diet. If you have your steps to the point that you're moving your body actively and keeping them regularly, day in and day out, and to me that is key. I've talked about steps, podcasts about them. And then you add structured cardio so you can burn a few more calories. Again, you need to trust it and not always make drastic changes. Just because you might be thinking to yourself, well, I get 10,000 steps per day. I'm doing 20 minutes every day cardio. Now, if I double it, go to 40 minutes, you know what? I should lose twice as much. You may in the beginning, but then you can risk metabolic shutdown again, and then more affecting the hormones. So really, you got to be careful with the changes. They can't be too hard too fast because you're going to get the big FU to your body. But it goes to the point, you got to be happy with what you're doing, but also understand that the after effects may not be the greatest. So again, cardio, you got to trust it. Now, this one here hits home because I used to be a supplement junkie. Literally, I used to try all sorts of fat burners and crazy things out there just because I thought I had to. But then again, science has shown that really fat burners are just bogus and really don't do anything. But back in the day, even before social media, I would look into magazines, the forums, and I would be deep in prep. And I'd be like, instead of trusting myself, I'd be like, oh, maybe if I use XY supplement, just because this guy says that it releases more glycogen into the bloodstream, therefore I'll be, losing body fat more, or I'll shuttle more glucose into the muscles and whatever. Use your imagination. I used to fall into that. And I'm here to tell you, don't fall into the trap, because after you are locked in, it is all about the diet, activity, cardio, weight training, proper sleep over any kind of supplement that you may be thinking. Now, obviously, you'll hear people say, oh, I use this supplement, this supplement, this supplement, and they won their pro card or won a big pro show. Well, most likely it's for the other reasons why they did so well, and not because they took something out of a bottle. And again, I'm here to tell you this because I don't want to see you waste your money or start using supplements. On the flip side, I've learned that certain coaches will prescribe certain supplements during the last few weeks. And it's usually out of desperation, where they think, you know what, this client of mine is not having as much success as I think they should have, or they're not reaching the point that maybe just to make them happy, I'll have them use these supplements. And these supplements are usually water pills, over-the-counter diuretics or different types of fat burners, and you're trashing them. And it's just a quick fix, but you're really not losing body fat. You're losing water weight, which is the last thing that you want to do, basically, when it comes to losing body fat properly. Because, again, you're going to screw your body up. It can lead to dangerous things, and it's really not worth it when you overload on one supplement when it's really not necessary to start it at all. But guilty as charged. I've tried just about everything, back in the 90s, early 2000s. But I can honestly tell you, my list of supplements over the last 3 shows, and that spans over 13 years, 11 years, have been minimal. Just the basics and the ones that I suggest to my clients, because I've learned it's a waste of money. You really don't need the supplementation of all these promises. And again, if you're locked in with everything, it's not going to make that big of a change. So number 6 that I want to cover, right? Or yes, 1, 2, 3, 5th one I want to cover is posing. I'm a big proponent on presentation, posing, and everything. But once you learn how to be locked in with your posing, you still want to continue it, and it's really just to build endurance and confidence, but don't overthink it. Quite often people overthink their posing and thinking, well, if I change it this way or this way because I saw her do that, I saw him do that. No, it's really something that once you learn, and I am a big fan of learning well in advance. I have these posing classes, and people not even thinking about competing. They just want to learn. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because that's one less stressor on your body and your mind that you got to focus learning how to pose if you are 4 weeks out from your competition. This is something that should be done way in the beginning. And once you accomplish it, practice once in a while to build your confidence, muscle memory, so you're nailing it, and then let it go. Don't overthink angles and where your arm placement should be. Once you get it down, if you're working with a coach, a posing coach, trust it in the beginning. Therefore, you don't have to worry about making tweaks. But I'll add, when you do lose body fat, you'll gain more confidence in your posing, because you're going to see more of the hard-earned muscle that you built and then started to uncover. So that is something that take that, worry about it in the beginning, touch upon it once in a while, but don't think you need to pose a certain way because you see what other people are doing. Next topic is coaching. Now, I just made a snarky post, depending on when this comes out, about coach chasing. And I've seen it firsthand, where you work with someone, they're doing great, in their middle of their prep and they switch coaches. And whatever the case may be, who knows? That could be for another topic on a podcast. But once you're locked in, that's the key phrase, and everything's going well, you should hopefully realize it and realize the progress that you are making is ideal for your physique at your current level. You got to trust it. You know, if this person or coach was able to get you locked in and you're into the groove and making nice progress, follow it through, because they know your body. They know how you respond. They collected all the data the months leading up, the prep before the prep, during the transition, and then during the progress that you were making. So then if you dump everything onto a new coach, and this has happened to me on the flip side, where someone will leave someone and come to me a month out after working with another coach, I'm like, all right, I got to gather all that information up, only because I can't just blindly give them a plan. So if you leave a coach, you got to realize that this new coach is not going to have all the information, and it's going to be harder for the new coach to really gather it to dial you in even better. So unless the fit was really terrible or the communication is really terrible and they're not giving you any guidance or any attention, switching coaches can be a challenge. And again, this is for you guys to figure out for yourself, and hopefully you don't have to experience it, where if you hire a coach, they're treating you well from the beginning and through all the way through the process, you want to stick with them. And that's why when you do hire a coach, it shouldn't be just 2 or 3 months out. You know, give them at least a year before you want to compete. Therefore, number one, you can see their style, their philosophy, and within a matter of a couple of weeks, you can tell if they're attentive to your needs. And then at that point, if they're not, then you can kick them to the curb and then look for someone else and give yourself plenty of time to work with them. But I've been on both ends. You know, the one end, when people leave me, it is what it is. I've had clients that left me after winning pro cards. That could be whatever. That's their issue. But it is what it is. So this in review is just covering and reminding you guys not to sweat the small stuff. Remain chill after you are locked in with your competition prep. Yes, small changes can be made. You can certainly push the diet when necessary when you do it responsibly. You can add more cardio, add more steps. You can change your training a little bit. But going balls out thinking you do drastic changes, 180s, if you are 3 or 4 weeks out, it's not going to make that big of a difference and could possibly set you back, mess up your hormones, screw up your metabolism, put you in a bad mindset. Because ultimately, guys, it is you versus you. And it's something that you want to embrace and enjoy the process of doing. So going back to the very beginning, and as I mentioned before, to me, getting locked in, getting in place is the hardest feat. It really is. And once you're doing that, ride it out. Enjoy what it brings, because you're going to have such a good time, and in knowing when you look back that you did everything possible for that given prep and that given moment to give you a nice opportunity to want to compete again. And that, to me as a coach, that's my goal. And finally, number 7, because I promise you 7, once you are locked in, again, if this is a drinking game, you're probably drunk by now by me saying locked in. And if you're still listening, hopefully you are. This is, to me, one of the more valuable tools and things to understand. Everything's in order. Everything's going great. So that means when it comes to your quote-unquote peak week or final plan, less changes, less drastic things have to happen. Because if you're coaching yourself, or if you have a coach that gathered all this data, they understand your body. You understand your body if you're self-coached. Therefore, nothing drastic needs to be done. A little bit more depletion, possibly sodium load, possibly more carbs, recovery training, and whatnot. So therefore, you finalize, everything's in a good groove, and you don't have to sweat the small stuff for those last 2 weeks. Because quite often when people aren't ready, they panic more. They do screwier things than just trusting the process. All right, I think I've been talking long enough. Hopefully this podcast has been helpful. Let me know in the comments what you think, any other suggestions, interested in my coaching and my philosophy. Always feel free to email me, fitfranco@verizon.net, and I'll talk to you next time.